Hi everybody, this is Dr. Langan again with another video in the Things That Changed My Brain Chemistry series. Today's topic is meningitis. Let me tell you the story. I was a second year resident at the time, and back in the day, we could choose whether to have a few days off around Christmas or a few days off around New Year's. And that year I picked New Year's so that we could look forward to vacation and not dread coming back to work, if that makes sense. And so our family, we lived about 4 or 5 hours away from most of our extended family when I was in residency. And so they waited to have their Christmas with us once, we came home. So the day before we were to leave, well, it wasn't, maybe it was 2 days before we were to leave, because it was Christmas Eve when this happened. I was on call in the PICU. Of course, all the horrible tragedies seem to happen either in the PICU, NICU, or emergency department. And we heard that these patients came in by EMS through the emergency department and then almost straight to the PICU because they needed so much support. And let me tell you what was going on. There were 2 teenage siblings, a brother and a sister, and they were both almost adult-sized, and both were full codes, and we were actively, as they came up to us and receiving them, we were trying to get more fluid boluses, more support, more pressor support. So when you are extremely sick, as in septic, crashing, coding, your blood pressure is very, very low. So not only are we trying to pour in fluids, but then they can start to third space and they get really puffy. We also need to tell some of their blood vessels to squeeze so that they can keep up their blood pressure enough to support blood flow to the brain, cerebral perfusion pressure, CPP. So they were on pressors like dopamine or dobutamine, that sort of thing. Obviously, this is not my area because now I'm all outpatient peds, but at the time, when you're in residency, you're all over that stuff. And I remember specifically we weren't wearing masks, and in retrospect, probably should have been. Maybe we weren't as quick to wear them back in the day. We had them and we wore them all the time if we knew there was a specific infectious disease threat. But at the time, we were just trying to save them. And so I got assigned to the boy, and there were whole teams, basically like the equivalent of a trauma room with nurses everywhere. The pharmacists are helping out, the attendings calling in backup support, other residents coming in to help run these codes, because this is a double pediatric code. It is a big deal. And then on top of that, Christmas Eve, you don't want parents to lose their children on Christmas Eve. So I remember that I intubated the boy, which was weird because, I prefer to not intubate people with teeth. But I did. I can do it. Well, I could then. I don't know if I could now. But I did get him intubated. We got him on the ventilator. Somebody else was dealing with the sister, and she got intubated. They both had multiple IVs going wide open. We had everybody in there. We noticed before our eyes, right in front of us, while we were watching, they got more and more and more of a petechial rash. So petechiae are these tiny little red dots on the skin that are basically tiny hemorrhages under the skin and can be a sign of many things, including low platelets, including DIC, disseminated intravascular coagulation, which can happen when somebody is septic, extraordinarily sick. And that's what was going on with them. They were in DIC. We could not keep their blood pressures up. And I cannot tell you how much physical energy it takes to perform CPR. Now, if it is a tiny preemie neonate, it may just be like this, and that won't wear you out. If it's a younger child, it just may be one hand, the heel of a hand. But these kids were like adult size. So this was full on regular CPR where your elbows are straight and you have to put your whole body into it. And you know me, I have to get double stools to do a CPR on big people because I'm so short, and you got to have some weight behind it to get enough pressure. And we had been doing this, oh my goodness, it was well over an hour. We may have hit the 2-hour mark because nobody wanted brother and sister to die on Christmas Eve. It was horrible. And we had so much modern medicine to offer, all the specialists, all the attendings, but it didn't work. We finally called it, and they both passed away, both the brother and the sister, on Christmas Eve, and it was horrible. And then after a code situation, everybody's just devastated, crying, broken, empty, and the room looks horrible, because when you're in the middle of that, you're using betadine wipes to get something sterile, and you're putting it down, and you're maintaining sterile field to start a central line or whatever you're doing, and there's just wrappers everywhere, and oh, it was horrible, horrible. And then you have to prepare the body for the family to see it. And so most of the time, once they're pronounced dead, we will, undo a lot of the things that looked horrible on their body for the parents to come and see them. And in this case, the parents were not there to observe the code situation and everything that we were in, because it was so fast, and they came straight up from the ER, straight from their house, and it was not good. It was horrible. So part of how that's changed my brain chemistry is, I remember a few days later, well, after that shift, when I went home, I was around my toddler son, and I remember thinking, because we figured out from the petechiae and from blood cultures that were taken, they did have meningitis, and the scary, fatal bacterial meningitis, the kind for which we now have a vaccine. This is why, if you have teenage kids, they have to get that Menactra vaccine. We encourage it once they turn 11 at their 11-year-old well check, but definitely school will kick them out in 7th grade if they haven't had it by then. Well, that's why. That prevents what these teenagers died of. And then your kids will get a booster dose at their 16-year-old well child check. So do you see now why I'm so passionate about adolescent vaccines, about all vaccines? If we had had a vaccine then and they would have had it, they wouldn't have died. And I don't think some people understand that when we get so caught up in political discussions about my rights to not give my child a vaccine. But do you understand the reason they were developed? They were developed to save your children from dying from things like bacterial meningitis. You guys, this matters so much. No one is developing vaccines to harm your child. We are developing them to save your children. And we are pediatricians. We want to save your children. We want to do what's best for them. So I hope you understand how running that code in the PICU of that young man who passed away has absolutely fueled my passion for vaccines to save children. They didn't deserve to die that way on Christmas Eve. Their parents didn't deserve to lose their only 2 children on Christmas Eve. It was a complete nightmare. So now you can understand maybe a piece. And that was just one example. So many other cases I've seen of vaccine-preventable illnesses that were fatal in children. So maybe you understand why I'm so passionate about vaccines now. I hope so.